I'm doing this at a public park, so this is very cringe. Black Easter is a fantasy novel written by James Blish in 1968. I had heard the name a few times, but I had never tried him out, so I'm glad I finally gave him a shot. Fun fact, apparently he made up the name gas giant for a classification for planets. I do not read fantasy. In fact, unless you consider Book of the New Sun or like Star Wars fantasy, I probably have not read one since childhood. But I watched the Book Pill Top 15 video, which I'm sure most of you guys have seen, and I saw this at number 1, and I was like, I just gotta give it a shot. Introduction, magic. Black Easter is set in future Earth, except in this Earth, magic happens. Well, not exactly magic, but Christians, powerful Christians, are able to manipulate angels and demons in a certain way to have pseudo-magical acts happen, especially demons. The demons don't just like show up and eviscerate someone though. They do it in kind of a sneaky way. Like a demon might cause a heart attack in someone and that's how they kill them. In this future, magic is dichotomous. So you've got white monks that practice white magic, you've got black monks that practice black magic. Black magic is used to aid in nefarious actions like raping and killing and stuff like that. And white magic can only be used for benevolent things. They even note that the only for-profit use of white magic is to find buried treasure, apparently. Blish compares the wizardry in Black Easter to something like engineering, which I think is super apt. While it is technically magic, it's technical and it's used practically for problem-solving things, whether that's evil or otherwise. Introduction, setup, and characters. All right, so this car is just staring at me, this big truck as they go past. All right, so what's up? Let's talk about the characters in this book. So there are 3 main ones. The first is Father Domenico. He is a white monk and part of a monastery called Monte Albano. His counterpart is Theron Ware, a black monk, and I loved that character. Now, unlike white monks, black monks, they work individually. The white monks, they kind of work in a group and they work for the benevolent betterment of humankind, but black monks, they work rogue. So basically a client will come to him and contract him to do something evil for them, and he specifically specializes in violent crimes. He's written like a sleazy private practice lawyer. He overcharges for everything that he has to do on the job, and he claims he's got morals, but he just uses that as a justification to charge more for immoral things. He justifies his evil by saying that it's all in the pursuit of knowledge, just like a lot of ridiculous scientists and business people in the real world. And the final main character of this story is Baines, and this is where the plot comes in. So Baines is this super rich American weapons dealer, and he wants to use the money that he's made to live out this pseudo-Armageddon fantasy that he has. And the white monks are obviously not going to help him on this, so he decides to hire Ware to enact his vision. Vibe. As you could probably tell from my description of Ware, well, a lot of this book focuses on demons and the end of the world. The vibe of this book is relatively lighthearted. The dialogue and situations are honestly even funny at times. Kind of for the reason that I touched on earlier, where it's sort of like engineering when they perform this magic. The murder and dark rituals are referred to in more of a matter-of-fact way than a lot of similarly dark books that I've read. It's kind of like The Midwich Cuckoos, which I read a bit ago, where the subject matter is very serious, but there is just this hint of goofiness at all times. Rituals. However, this hint of goofiness is absolutely left behind during what is the climax and the most important parts of this novel, which is the rituals. A few times in this book, Ware leads the viewer through these scenes where he communicates to the demons, or he summons them, or otherwise interacts with them, and these are intense. They're honestly straight out of a horror movie, and each demonic act is vividly described. It is extremely creepy and very macabre. These were all scenes that stuck with me after I put the book down, and I know that I'm absolutely going to remember these scenes months down the road. I consider myself quite progressive religiously, but even myself, after I read some of these scenes, I was like, damn, do I gotta go wash my hands or say a Hail Mary or something? The one negative thing about these scenes is that even though this is a super short book, I feel like they drag on just a few pages too long. Don't get me wrong, these scenes rock, but they just feel the slightest bit drawn out. It's like a really hilarious joke that someone repeats one time too many. There's like so many people that just drive by. I'm like right by this road right here, and there's a bunch of people that drive by and they're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? I also want to restate that I don't think that the minor air of lightheartedness that I mentioned earlier in this review takes away whatsoever from these scenes. They are serious and they're intensely Stygian. The Covenant. So the reason that Ware and Domenico work so closely with each other throughout these scenes without stepping on each other's toes is because of this thing that they call the Covenant. It's a pact by the church that defines this code of conduct that must be adhered to between black and white magicians. And the big part of it that comes into play during Black Easter is that they cannot interfere with what each other are doing. So it leads us to these scenes where Domenico, the good mage, is at Ware, the evil mage's demon summoning rituals, and he can't do anything to fight against the actions of Ware. So he just spends the book as like this completely useless bystander while Ware is going around doing all the most terrible demonic shit. And given the gravity of what Ware is doing in these situations, it just kind of comes off as ridiculous. I will be fair though, I think that this was supposed to be done to like parody the bureaucratic red tape and stuff in religious groups and governments. Like, for example, there's this one scene where the white magicians are just acting completely like a bunch of C-level executives with their office politics and bureaucracy and stuff like that. But does that give it a pass to just be as annoying and stupid as it wants and just get away with it by being like, oh no, this is satire. Not to me, honestly. It does set up some pretty ridiculous situations in my eyes. Anyway, this part of the book is a big thumbs down for me, but really it doesn't knock the book too much overall. Aside. Fantasy versus science fiction. I want to take a quick second to do a little bit of an aside and talk about something that I've thought a lot about recently and that I think is really fun, which is to talk about the difference between science fiction and fantasy. And this is something that I wanted to talk about in this review because obviously this book is labeled as fantasy and I read mostly science fiction. I think I've mentioned this before in a review, but when I was taking a class in college, a writing class, a science fiction writing class, my professor told me that the difference between science fiction and fantasy is that while both of them utilize unrealistic technology, science fiction implies reason behind that technology and fantasy does not. And since I've really upped the amount of science fiction that I've been reading in the past few years, I've thought about that a lot, and I think that it's a pretty good heuristic, but it's not an exact science. I think that another way to distinguish the genres is through recurring stereotypes and motifs. For science fiction, I would say that would be things like time travel and aliens and spaceships and even stuff that's like non-story elements, like specifically for new wave science fiction, the archetype of shorter 200-ish page books exploring a certain thought experiment. And because of those stereotypes or motifs, for all intents and purposes, a book like Black Easter is absolutely going to be labeled as fantasy with its wizarding and scrying and castles on mountaintops and stuff like that. But in my own headcanon, this book is science fiction to me. It is a bite-sized novel, takes place with an imaginative future world state, and there's a pragmatic methodology behind the fantasy that happens. Conclusion, plain old good. When I reviewed The Midwich Cuckoos, not to hate on that book, again in this review, I said that if a book didn't have like this brilliant philosophical undertone to it, I wanted it to at least really grab my attention the whole time, and this one totally did. This is one of those books where I just want to be a lazy reviewer. I want to get in front of the camera, I want to shrug my shoulders, and I want to say, yeah, this is just a damn good book. Black Easter is small in scope. It defines a very interesting world with black magic and white magic and a bastardized, corrupted version of the Christian church ruling over it all. It has really great imagery of demonic shit, and it's kind of creepy, and that's it, but it does all that really well. This is one of the books that, in my opinion, it really holds up to that test of like reading the first chapter, and if you liked it, you're going to love this book, and if not, it's fine, it might not be for you. Personally, well, it's not going to be necessarily my #1 book of the year, book of all time. I'm absolutely glad that I went out of my comfort zone a little bit to try some fantasy. Thanks for watching.